Hello, this is Pastor Don Long, and here we are once again for our weekly broadcast, Grafted In. I'm so glad that you choose to tune in, whether it's the Monday broadcast or the Thursday night one. It's good that you take this time out and let's sit together and consider what's going on in the world. Sometimes we look at the Jewish roots of the Christian faith, we look at the festivals, the moads, and then at other times we step back and we take a very contemporary look at what's going on in the world. A concerning world, I know, for many of you. You've heard me say it before, but I believe the coming elections are perhaps one of the most vital in American history. America's got to make a decision. Do we continue down a road where we step away from that which we've always believed, we move further away from the Constitution, or do we somehow make a course correction and say we need to return to some values that we've always held on to as a nation? In the midst of this, a theme that I've shared off and on over the years is the biblical concept found in the book of Genesis, that the nations that bless Israel are going to be blessed, and nations that come against Israel are going to find that the judgment as a nation is that they're on the outside of God's plan for humanity. Both individually in how we treat Yeshua's brethren. If you've done it to the least of my brethren, you've done it for me. If you failed to come to the aid of my brethren, you failed to come to my aid. That individual judgment will impact people who call themselves Christians all around the world. You will be held accountable for how you personally have related to the Jewish people. But as nations, we will also be held accountable as how we deal with God's people, the people of Israel, the land of Israel. And the prophets are very clear in the Torah, in the Old Testament. For example, he who divides the land will himself be divided. So as a nation, if our foreign policy has anything to do with dividing the land of Israel, we are setting ourselves up in the spiritual realities of this planet for division to take place in America. That division is already here. And I believe that division is partly the result of the fact that over the last 8 years, under the present administration, America has begun to back off of its commitment to Israel. In our universities around this nation, there is a tremendous move of anti-Israel, even anti-Semitic views being expressed. And it's already showing up in the fact that America is more racially divided, gender divided, ethnic divided, and religiously divided than I think it's ever been in its history. Furthermore, the division can begin to take place geographically as well, and more to say about that later. So the issue about where you are with Israel is not a minor issue. The issue where the church is with Israel is not a minor issue. But what's going on in the world, and how is it that you and I can know so little through the mainstream media of what's really happening in this nation vis-a-vis Israel? Very interesting, an article that I picked up this week, that Berkeley College in California has a course on how to destroy Israel. I don't believe that's literally the course title, but it literally is a teaching of how to destroy Israel. Berkeley College has reinstated an anti-Israel course that examines the options for a decolonized Palestine, as they call it. The news article said this on the internet. The University of California, UC Berkeley, has reinstated an explicitly anti-Israel course which discusses, among other anti-Israel issues, how Palestine would look without Israel and examines the possibilities to that end. Now, think about it. Here is a course in a modern college in America, and the point of the course is we're going to examine what would Palestine look if we obliterated Israel. My goodness, the Zionist Organization of America has condemned the course, rightfully so. And perhaps what is an understatement of the year, they said that a course would not be given that advocated the dismantlement of any other country in the world. Can you imagine a course that said, I want to teach a course at Berkeley on the dismantlement of Brazil so there's no more Brazil? Excuse me? Can you imagine a course being offered at a university? The theme of the course is, what would Europe look like if we removed France? What are you talking about? You're going to have a course, the agenda of which is to develop an understanding of how would we construct the Middle East and remove an entire nation state. The course title is actually Palestine, a settler colonial analysis. And it says it examines the history of the region from the 1880s through the lens of settler colonialism. The ZOA, the Zionist Organization of America, notes that this presumes fallaciously that Zionism is a colonialist movement rather than a national liberation movement. Now, any other movement of ethnically identified people is considered a national liberation movement unless it's the Jews in their own homeland, and then it's considered colonialism. There is a lack of intellectual integrity on our college campuses today that I think is mind-boggling. That you say this over here, but in this one case of Israel, you act and speak just the opposite. The course has an aim, quote, to explore the connection between Zionism and settler colonialism and the possibilities of a decolonized Palestine. In other words, one in which Jewish self-determination and statehood is non-existent. The course readings, the required books to read for it, consist heavily in anti-Zionist passages from so-called new historians. What's a new historian? A new historian is one who wants to rewrite history. I won't bother you with all their names, but the course uses materials from organizations that seek to defame Israel, such as the one called Breaking the Silence. It even includes readings from the Goldstone Report, whose anti-Israel findings were eventually rejected by the chairman, Judge Goldstein himself. I mean, that's amazing. The Goldstein Report about what went on in Gaza. When that finally was put together, 1 year later, Judge Goldstein, who chaired the meetings and the report's named after him, said, I vehemently reject the conclusions of the report. And yet now that's become the standard report to say even Judge Goldstein, believes Israel was wrong. The course reading materials have not one book, not one article from scholars who do not condemn Zionism. Absolutely amazing. And so you look at it, this is UC Berkeley. It's just astounding to me what's going on. And so I came across another article, and I hope this shifts the discussion in the two-state solution kind of talking. And that is, it comes from an article titled, Where is Ethnic Cleansing Permissible? Now, ethnic cleansing simply says that we are going to remove all of a certain people. If this were in America, ethnic cleansing would be that we're going to take any city, we could take Fitchburg, and say that we have decided that Fitchburg no longer will have any Hispanic people in it. Well, what that means is then we're going to force anybody of Hispanic origins to leave the city, and then we might say, and we're going to have no African Americans, so we're going to establish only a white city here. That would be called ethnic cleansing. That's where you take one identifiable group, and the majority of people around say, we don't want that group with us anymore, and certainly that idea has been present throughout human history. But by and large in America, we came after we got through the knothole of segregation, we began to move into a place where we realize ethnic cleansing is not moral, it's not right. Because ethnic cleansing ultimately leads to genocide. Now, what is genocide? Genocide is when you seek to destroy an entire race of humanity. I mean, if we look back into the 20th century and on into our century, in 1914, from 1914 to 1922, the Ottoman Empire practiced genocide against the Greeks and the Assyrians and murdered over 1.5 million of them simply because they were Greek, because they were Assyrian. In 1915 to 1922, we had the Armenian genocide. It took the world quite a while to acknowledge that was a genocide, but there was a deliberate attempt to destroy, and 1.5 million were destroyed in that genocide. Then from 1939 to 1945, we have the horrendous Holocaust, which it's amazing again that there's people who try to deny that it happened. You know, General Eisenhower, after the end of World War II, as he went into the concentration camps, he told the Army photographers, I want you to make sure you capture this in film, lest there be a generation after us that doesn't believe it happened. General Eisenhower was aware of the propensity of people to deny that evil existed. But the Holocaust cost over 6 million people's lives. Because we want a pure Aryan race, we're going to obliterate every Jew. Hitler was committed, and the Nazis, to eliminate every single Jewish person from this planet, and triggered a horrific genocide, and there are people today who want to do the same. But we don't even have to go back that far. We can go to 1971, and there was a genocide in Bangladesh, where simply by racial identity, people were killed. And the tragedy in Bangladesh was scholars can't agree on how many. Was it 300,000 that were murdered or 3 million? My goodness, that is a tremendous range. We're talking about either 300,000 human lives were snuffed out just because of their identity, or was it 3 million? That many people were slaughtered. We don't even know who they were. We don't even agree on the numbers. Or we can go to 1975 to 1979 in Cambodia with a Khmer Rouge who came in, and 3 million people were killed. 3 million people. That's a genocide. You come into a nation and I'm going to destroy all the people of a certain ethnic identity. Or we can go even earlier now to 1992 or through 1995 in Bosnia, and it's estimated that there were 39,000 people killed in Bosnia simply by their religious identification. We can jump into 1994 and we can look at Rwanda, and there were over 1 million people killed in that African nation simply by their ethnic identity. That is genocide. We in America have a propensity to put our hands over our eyes and say, I don't see it, don't want to talk about it, don't want to believe it's there. We can look at what's going on in Syria right now. From 2014 to 2016, between 300,000 and 400,000 Syrians have been killed in that civil war. Vast numbers. And so my question is, what is ethnic cleansing, and when is it permissible? Now, if I were to go and poll people today and say to them in the streets, when is ethnic cleansing permissible? They would say, what on earth are you talking about? It is never permissible. But in the past weeks, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has really stirred up the ire of the United Nations and the United States State Department. They've accused him of going too far because he's used that phrase to say what the Palestinians want is nothing short of ethnic cleansing. The U.S. State Department said, that's not so, that's not what they want, that's not fair. You can't say they want to have an ethnic cleansing. Let me ask you, when Abbas says that my vision is for a Palestine without one Jew living in it, that's ethnic cleansing. What are you going to do with the 300,000 Jews that live there? Those people who say, well, I think the green line should be the new division. I don't care where the division is, but for the sake of discussion, let's say we're going to divide it along the green line, and everything east of the green line now becomes Palestine. Who gets to live in Palestine? Not one Jew. And I don't care who you are, you have got to do, you can be the President of the United States and you're going to get this wrong. Because you're going to say, well, no, they don't want to, they're not into ethnic cleansing. Friends, they most certainly are. They envision and talk about every Jew being cast out. Now, by the way, they don't even stop there because they want to go on to genocide because their view is a Palestine that doesn't include Israel at all. They own it all. And when you see these college campus students going around with their banners and crying out, Palestine from the river to the sea, from the river to the sea, they're talking about from the Jordan River all the way to the Mediterranean, no Israel. Those college students are advocating genocide. Call it what it is. Quit calling, well, they just have a different, they're just into people who want to be liberated. They're into slaughtering every single Jew in Israel. Now, do we have any history of that? Sure. Right before the Six-Day War, Anwar Sadat came on national news and it was broadcast around the world. Our view is the entire elimination of the Zionist entity of Israel. There will not be one Jew left. How are you going to take over the country of Israel and there's not one Jew left? You're going to kill every single one of them. That's genocide. And anybody that won't call it genocide is you're deceiving yourself, and you are the silent majority who won't speak up against such insanity and say, enough is enough. Oh, Abbas says nice things when he's speaking to the Western press, but when he's speaking in Arabic, and thank God for the internet, because now we can have people who translate what's being said in Arabic, what's being spoken to the people, and Abbas over there says, not one Jew left. Do we have any example of that? We sure do. We can look at what happened in Gaza. See, I have nothing wrong with trying ideas. What I think is insanity is to keep trying the same thing over and over and over and over again and getting worse and worse and worse results, but refusing to say, maybe what I'm trying is wrong. Land for peace has never worked in the Middle East. It never will. I can't give you 5 acres when you want it all. I can't give you this section when your ultimate commitment is to have it all. Until the Palestinian Authority changes their charter, because in their charter they call for the entire destruction of Israel, then how can we negotiate? What on earth is America doing? Giving money to the Palestinian Authority, which is an entity committed to the destruction of a sovereign nation of the United Nations. What on earth is America doing giving money to the United Nations when the United Nations will not uphold its own charter that says we will not support one nation attacking another nation? They will not condemn the Palestinians for launching rockets into Israel. It's time for us to say about the United Nations, we're not playing that game anymore. We're just not going to play it. You go have your United Nations somewhere else. By the way, we're not going to pay for it. We're not going to pay for the building in New York. We're not going to be the biggest contributor far over any other combination of nations. We pay more for help in the Middle East than all the Arabs put together. Enough. We're not going to play that game anymore. We're not going to be part of a club that won't even follow its own rules. Glory to God. So here's the point. Netanyahu looks, and he's finally, and I don't know why the Israeli government didn't do this before, other than they were trying to be politically correct and not offend the President of the United States or not offend the liberals. But he's finally saying, wait a minute, what the Palestinian Authority wants is ethnic cleansing. They want every Jew out. And so the last time the United States meddled in affairs with Israel and the Palestinians was over Gaza. My wife and daughter and I were in Gaza, visiting Moshe and Rachel Saperstein in Gush Katif, in their nice home in a nice community where the communities there, they weren't fighting their neighbors, they weren't shooting at their neighbors. In fact, they were building hothouses in the sand and employing their neighbor Palestinians to come and work. And the Prime Minister, Ariel Sharon, said, we're pulling out of Gaza. Now, why did he say that? Because the State Department of the United States put pressure on him as a token of peace. Not because the Palestinians finally did what the truce called for after the Six-Day War, which was to sit down and let's talk about it. No, they won't even come to the table to talk about it. But so Sharon said, unilaterally, we're going to give you Gaza just to show our good faith to you setting up a nation. Where did that go? It ended up with Gaza being taken over entirely by the Arabs. Now, notice there's no Jews in Gaza. There is not one Jew in Gaza. Can you imagine if all of a sudden, we have a discussion here in Massachusetts that goes around, it's got to come around every 5-6 years, where Western Massachusetts has this little movement of people who say, we want to create a different state. You know, west of Springfield, we're left out of everything. It's Boston, it's the 128 belt. The Eastern Massachusetts doesn't care about us. We want to become our own state. Well, just for a moment, imagine that all of a sudden the movement got enough movement and they decided, yes, we're going to create a state and it's going to go on the ballot. Can Western Massachusetts break off and become a new state with a new name? And then all of a sudden it's found out. But in their charter of their new state, they say, we want a new state of Western Massachusetts, but no African Americans are allowed to live here. You say, Pastor, what are you talking about? I mean, that's ridiculous. Nobody would ever say that. And if they did say it, who's going to vote to create a state where they say at the beginning, as a state, we're not going to allow anybody from this ethnic identity to live there? And yet that's exactly what America's State Department is accepting from the PA. They know there will be a Palestine without one Jewish family living in it. And if any Jewish family who owned the land, by the way, and in Gaza, they owned the land, if they decided we're going to stay here, they would have done so at the risk of their life and more than likely been killed. Folks, this is what's going on in the world. I happen to believe that most Americans who have a brain can figure that out. You've got to be educated in the wrong way to not see clearly what is going on. And so given the drumbeat of incitement of hatred of the Jews and that Israelis have heard and constantly see in the Palestinian media, in their schools, it's hard to argue, as some critics of Netanyahu do, that Jews wouldn't be at risk in their own state. Come on, right now there's this move where imams in mosques throughout the Palestinian Authority are telling their congregations, stab Jews, where you turn onto the Children's Network, the state-sponsored PBS, if you will, Children's Mr. Rogers, telling young Arab children in that area of the West Bank to pick up knives and kill Jews. This is their goal in life, to grow up, to have a knife, to kill a Jew. You say, oh, that can't be. Look in the internet. It's all over there. You can see it, the actual films of the training camps where little children go to summer camp and learn how to crawl under barbed wire and how to stab and kill. Folks, there's an evil world out there. And we can't deal with the evil world and we can't find solutions if we can't begin to agree on the facts. How on earth can we have an intelligent discussion in the world, at the UN, in the United States, on our college campuses, how even here in Fitchburg, can we have an intelligent discussion about the Middle East if we can't agree upon the facts of what's being said, of what's being done? You know, it's an interesting side point here that right now the Israeli government has an agreement with Hamas, if you can believe that under medical emergency situations, that authorized doctors can sign certificates, and Palestinians living in Gaza can cross the border and come into an Israeli hospital and get treated. Those passes, if you call it, that need to be signed by a certified doctor and need to be approved by a Ministry of Health run by Hamas, those are the hottest and highest priced documents right now. Recent revelation from a reporter, and I believe it was a woman, I might be wrong about that, but at great risk to their personal life, revealed that there's this great black market going on where those who have the money can pay for those, but if you don't have the money, no matter how sick you are, you can't get into Israel. So here's the truth, that while the leaders of the PA and Hamas are talking about kill and destroy Israel, when their own children have heart disease, when they have diseases that can't be cured anywhere but Israel, they're sending their family members into Israel to get healed, to get cured, but they're not changing their tenor about destroying Israel. There has been enough money given to Hamas in Gaza to build 12 modern hospitals. Where's the money gone? Well, the money's gone to build tunnels. Well, why are they building tunnels? So they can go in and abduct Jewish soldiers, or so they can send 20 of their terrorists in through a tunnel into a Jewish town and slaughter Jews. You see, is ethnic cleansing ever permissible? And yet right now, because of our government's commitment to a two-state solution, with a group of people who want an ethnically Jewish free entity called Palestine, we are a people who are on record in the annals of God's heaven as supporting ethnic cleansing of God's own people. I don't think you want that. I don't think I want that. And unless we speak up, then we are part of the silent people who are allowing this nation to take a stand against God, against His people, and against His land. I believe God's raised up a new generation of us who are willing to speak up and stand up and be bold and say, we believe the United States in its past has and will now stand for Israel. This is Pastor Don Long. Look forward to talking to you next week. God bless you.